All right. Well, I think we're live. Looks like we're live. And for those of you that are sticking around after enlightening with the one and only Whitney, thank you for hanging out with us. I'm glad. Actually, I forgot to ask you, Jennifer. Is it good afternoon for you at this point? I
Yes, it
think.
officially
Yeah.
now is. Yes.
All right. So we're both in the Central Time Zone. So good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be. I'm back in my actual home instead of trying to do this from a hotel room. That was an interesting experiment. I think it worked out okay. I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to figure that out. Now that we're getting back on airplanes, I guess I better learn how to do this from the road at some point. But hi, Jennifer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I can't complain. It's I'd like to say it's summer, except the temperatures tell me something different. We're
Yep.
rolling into Memorial Day weekend here in the States, which means the weather, usually, at least for me, I have a lot more memories of cold and rainy Memorial Day weekends than I do of warm, sunny Memorial Day weekends. But I don't know. Well, Monday is usually gorgeous because that's your last day, and then you have to leave the cabin and go back to the real world. But
Right. It's usually the way it works out. Yeah. We
right.
had some storms roll in over the weekend, and so the
Oh,
temperatures cooled off. But I think they're actually supposed to get nice and warm by this weekend. So
okay.
this should be nice.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I saw there was some crazy weather going through where Jeff Strauss lives, and I was kind of concerned about that. He showed some videos that got my attention, would be the politest way to put it. Like, ooh,
Oh,
what's going on there?
I
Those are
haven't seen
that's
those.
like a funnel cloud. I can't remember the restaurant, but he said, yeah, this is where we go to get waffles or something to that effect, and that's a funnel cloud.
Oh, no.
Probably
Yeah.
fine, maybe
Probably
for some
fine.
definition of fine, but
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like for the Midwest, tornadoes are kind of like earthquakes for the West Coast and hurricanes for the
yes,
East Coast.
yes.
And, you just live with the risk of it.
At least you kind of know they're coming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of the advantages of the tornado is you at least have the general sense of what kinds of conditions can make one happen. I that
Yeah.
would be what would give me so much pause about earthquakes is having absolutely
Yeah.
no idea when they might happen. Just going about your day blissfully, and then the ground moves.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
really, like that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but
Uh-uh.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that's usually where the Californians say, yes, but our weather's nicer than yours. It's the
Well,
price you pay. I'm like,
that's fair, I
well, okay,
guess.
okay. I mean, that's fine. That's fine, I guess, for some definition of fine. So, for those people who don't know you or are unfamiliar with you, what's your origin story? How did you get into this strange world of developer relations advocacy? This, and I know we were talking in the pre-show about kind of the cool stuff we get to do. We'll get into that, but how'd you get to this spot?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a interesting, I guess, kind of fast-paced, unusual story, maybe. But I went to college as a music major. I studied violin performance and got my bachelor's degree in that, and then had a business minor. Um,
Okay.
both my parents were programmers, and we knew how we grew up playing computer games and doing a lot of technical stuff. Um, my sister and I did like a web build your own website class over the summer.
Oh, sure.
That was long before you had a bunch of like templates and things like that. Um, but still, it was one of those things that I knew computers was going to be a part of of any field that I chose, and I
Right.
knew good business skills and good business sense is a vital skill to have no matter what you're doing. And so I had the business minor alongside that, and
Sure.
as part of the business minor and some of the like summer classes and stuff I took for that, I ended up doing a little bit of programming.
Oh, sure.
And I kind of enjoyed it. I liked the combination of creativity and logic, the same blend actually that you get in music as well. Um, but you don't necessarily have to sit. Well, I guess you trade one practice for another. I would say you don't have to sit 8 to 9 hours inside a practice room,
Right.
practicing your instrument, but instead you trade that for sitting in front of a computer coding. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
not sure you're really getting one ahead of the other in that
Sure.
regard, but there's a lot of flexibility, and computers gave me the possibility to kind of play music on the side if I chose to. So
Sure.
I ended up deciding, hey, I really like programming. I want to pursue this, and so I finished out my bachelor's degree because I was pretty close at that point, and then moved straight into a master's degree in computer management and information systems, which was a blend between computer science and the basically computer business, or I think what degree even was that? I can't remember.
Bless you.
Sorry.
Way to have the mute button handy. That's a professional move right there. You're way ahead of me.
Well, sometimes I get there and sometimes I don't. So, but I finished out the master's, and a few minutes into, or a few months into my graduate program, I had a classmate that sat next to me, and he's like, "Hey, we've got an opening at our company. I think you'd be a great fit for it. Submit your resume." I'm like, "Okay, you do realize I've had like 3 months of tech school, basically, 3 months of computer school." And so I did, and that got moved through, and I ended up getting hired like 3 months in. So it was kind of one of those eye-opening things. It's like, what, I'm 3 months into my computer degree, and somebody's willing to pay me,
Right,
to work
right.
as a programmer already. And so that was a really fantastic opportunity. Had a lot of really great mentors there. Learned a lot out of the gate, and finished up my master's degree as I worked. And then wrapped up with that. Worked for a while longer there. And then decided I just wanted to move on to something new, a new challenge. Dad had kind of
Sure.
invited me to come with him to Java One. And so I did that first year as a student. That's one of the nice perks about Java One, is that they had free student tickets. And so
Right.
I was able to go and just meander and watch. I just had to pay my flight and my hotel. So,
Sure.
so that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, got to meet a lot of really fantastic people there, and then came back and decided I kind of want to submit something, the following year. So I did, and it got accepted. So I went back the following year as a speaker to Java One, and that really
Wow.
just kind of kicked it off. I did that, and then I also earlier that year, my professor at school had asked me to write a joint paper with her. And so I
Wow.
wrote that, and she had me submit it to an academic conference in Michigan, and it got accepted there. So I went and presented our paper there in May, and then I went and presented at Java One in, what was it, September, October, or whatever it was that
Right.
year. So that kind of kicked things off, and I
Yes, it did.
really decided that, hey, I kind of like this. I enjoy doing this kind of thing. I like writing technical content, but then I enjoy interacting with the developers and showing them how to
Right.
do this or that, and publish technical content. So I think I guess it wasn't until the very beginning of 2018 that Ryan Boyd had reached out to me from Neo4j saying, "Hey, we have an opening at Neo4j for developer relations. Would you consider, submitting?" I'm like, "Yes, this sounds like an awesome opportunity." So I did, and got through all the interviews. And our company is still really big on, you meet with your leader and a couple other people within the department, and then our CEO does all the interviews as well for everybody coming
Oh,
in.
wow.
So I flew out really quickly, like an overnighter, to the San Mateo office out there by San Francisco, and did interviews, and came back and went to work the next morning. and
Wow.
got that all got accepted. And so I started, I guess it was mid to late February at Neo4j. And since then I've been anything from on the road conference speaker to blogger, technical blogger, to I have GitHub repos out all over the place for demos. I've
Hmm.
done a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So it's a lot of fun though. And that's been 4.5 years ago now. So
Wow. That's crazy. Well,
yeah.
Quote of Sean says that they met you at KCDC a few years back.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I really missed during the pandemic. The fact, I mean, we could still do a lot of our stuff from home, which good for us, right? I mean, I was very fortunate in that regard. But it was a lot harder to do the hallway track. It was a lot harder to
Yeah.
do the bumping into someone and, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. I mean, I make no bones about it. This is part of why I started this series, was it gave me an excuse to try to recreate the hallway track, because I would
Yeah.
inevitably bump into you somewhere and we'd catch up. And it's like, yeah, we don't get to do that. Well, all right, well, let's make it happen online. So,
Yeah.
so there you go. Now, I think the fact that you came at this from a musical background is fascinating. And Deshaun says that many of his favorite developer types are either musical or musicians.
Yeah.
Why do you think there is such a connection there. I mean, it seems so common for folks to have either like they play an instrument or they sing. Like, I mean, as I'm kind of going through my brain, now I can't even hum, so I have no musical talent, but many people do. There's clearly a connection there. I mean, what do
Yeah.
you think is that connection between sort of musical ability, talent, interest, and banging on a keyboard?
I think it's the combination of kind of logical structures that then you add your own creative flair or personality to when you actually
Sure.
play. So you actually have and I always loved music theory, which not a lot of people do. Um, I remember a lot of my music theory classes in school. Everybody was like, "Oh, I hate this class. Oh, I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, I actually love this because the more that I understand the structure and how music is put together, the more that I
Sure.
can do with it and add things if I want to, or I can memorize things faster because I know what's supposed to be coming, or I can expect things. So it's a little bit of that. You have to kind of know the boundaries, if you will. And when you're working in, I'm a Java background developer.
Yep.
Um, when you work with a language, you have that same general construct. So you have certain
Sure.
things you kind of have to do. Okay, hey, I want to write a constructor. You have to do it this way. Or hey, I want to write a domain class versus repository. I have to structure it like this. But then within that, you kind of have control over how you want to maneuver the logic within that, specifically for like
Mhm.
methods or calculations, or how the program flow, where you want it to jump from place to another. And so that's where you add your own personal flair. Hey, I could do this, or I
Right.
could do it this way. What is the more efficient, or what's the cleaner way to do this, or what's more
Mhm.
repeatable by somebody else? And you do that same thing with music. I'm classically trained, so classical music background, which is a little bit more strict, but you still have your own flair and kind of
Sure.
take on a piece of music when you play it. And you kind of get that same thing in tech. I think one other overlap too that I will mention for DevRel is a little bit of performance skill.
Yes.
So,
I was just
from being
thinking
a
that.
musician, you're used to being up on stage. I
Right.
loved playing in an orchestra where you had a big group, so it's a little bit different being solo. But when you would
Mhm.
solo, you would practice the tar out of something until you knew it
Right.
backwards and forwards. My teacher would even say, go out toward the edge of or the noisiest part of the house and play, have, dog barking or kids running in the
Sure.
background, or, doing this or that. And it was the whole point was to get you focused where nothing would distract you from what you were trying to
Right.
play. And
Right.
so that same thing then resonates when I'm now getting up in front of audiences and speaking at
Sure.
conferences. I'm used to kind of that built in, hey, I've practiced this. I know this really well. I know this content. I'm my own expert at least. And I have something to share and something I want to show other people. And so then you get up there with that, you always have the pre-stage nerves, you get up there and you're still
Mhm.
nervous, but then once you start in, it's almost like
Yeah.
repetition kicks in and that it just kind of takes over and you're in the zone. And so then
Yeah.
you just, spill stuff out and you get it all done. And then, you wrap up and you let people ask questions or whatever, or, you take your bow or whatever it is, if you're playing on stage. So I think that aspect works really well because I've kind of been trained a little bit for that, where
Sure.
getting up in front of an audience doesn't phase me as badly as what it potentially could
Right.
have.
Right. Well, I mean, there's always that statistic about how many people fear public speaking more than anything else. And, I know personally, if you would have told me even in college that I would essentially make my living by getting in front of audiences and talking, I would have said, absolutely not. There's no chance.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. This will never happen. And then
Yeah.
eventually realized actually I really like that. There's
Yeah.
nothing quite like being in front of an audience, especially when it's
Mm-mm.
rolling, and they're laughing and they're in tune and they're you can just see that you're vibing, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing. That's definitely a huge part of this, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's such an interesting phrase that music, while there is that structure there, you have to make it yours. And then,
Yeah.
every musician has a fingerprint, a voice. Every presenter has a voice.
Yeah.
You and I could both do a talk on the same topic and even agree beforehand, these are the 5 things we're going to cover. The talks would be nothing alike.
Right.
And I think that's part of what's fun about this, is that
Yeah.
you get to bring yourself to the party and see what kind of trouble that gets you into. But
Yeah.
Oh, and Code Sean has a good comment. The only fortune cookie I ever kept says only the prepared speaker deserves to be confident. Yeah, well, it's interesting because there is a lot that goes into that. I think people have this view of a conference talk that, well, you show up and it's 45 minutes or it's an hour or it's an hour and a half,
Mhm.
and they have no idea of how much work and time and presenting to your cats
Right.
goes into preparing for that hour. And especially if it's live coding. I mean, I'm sort of lukewarm on live coding. There's people who do it very well, like Venkat, like Josh, but people don't understand how much effort people put into making it look effortless.
Yeah. Yeah, it requires a lot of work. And some people are better at, kind of winging it or coming up to speed
Sure.
faster than others, but I've always felt like it's hard to substitute hard work.
Yeah.
So you pour in the time early on, and then if you
Yeah.
can coast for a few weeks and not do anything with it, and then just refresh, the day before or the week before or whatever, great, do that.
Yeah.
But nothing is worse than waiting until the last minute and feeling like I got to get something together and I got to help developers understand this stuff, and
Right.
feeling like stress your brain doesn't function well when it's that
No.
high on stress.
No.
And so you're not putting together maybe your best foot or your best piece of content you possibly could, where if you spend, I don't know, month in advance, a week in advance even,
Right.
put stuff together, run it, just make sure it sounds okay, or everything works, and then run it closer to time, then that often works out better.
Right.
And again, some people throw things together and it works out great, and that's fine. That's them. But I would be an absolute mess if I did
Right.
that.
Right.
So I have to be well prepared up front, or I'm just a total bundle of nerves. So
Yeah, that's a level of stress that most of us don't want. And
no.
the most epic fails I've ever seen were people being radically underprepared. I still
Mm.
think one of the most, frankly, disrespectful things I ever saw was a person who showed up for a keynote and admitted that they started working on it in the cab from the airport to the hotel like that morning.
Oh,
It's like,
ouch.
that's not cool.
No.
And you certainly don't say that to the audience, and
No.
I just thought, how
They
could you
Yeah,
do
usually keynotes are first thing in the morning. Everybody's gotten up out
yeah,
of bed and got themselves
yeah,
ready and had breakfast and gotten there on time, and yeah, you worked on your stuff on the cab right
well,
over.
I think one of the talks that I rehearsed the most was like an 8-minute keynote at O'Reilly's SACon, because I knew I only had this short window, so I had to make sure my timing was right.
Yep.
And again, it's a keynote, and I mean, you don't want to biff on a keynote because you've got pretty good chunk of the audience in front of you at the whole event. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't understand that. I mean,
And I mean, there are a few that are good at, riffing and making stuff up, but I feel like for most of us, maybe me especially, um, it it leaves too many opportunities for you to make yourself look like a fool,
yes,
um,
yes,
like you haven't put the work in, like you don't care.
right,
And
right,
so, all it takes is, I don't know, half hour, 3
right.
hours, whatever it is you decide to put in, the effort you put in, that effort shows.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, definitely.
so
Well, Glenn insists that we're all introverts that pretend to be extroverts. I think you might be on something there, Glenn.
yeah.
And then my cats give my presentations better than I do. Speaking of that, one of my cats decided this was the time to show up. So my guess is that means he's going to jump on the desk and probably mess with something, because that's what he does. He likes to be
The
part
re
of the
the
action.
the reason that cats can probably give presentations better is that they don't care what other people think.
Right, right. Yeah, they're
Like,
like,
"I don't
we're
care.
fine.
I'm
Don't care. You
brilliant.
don't like
You're
my talk? I
not."
don't care. Get out of here. Get out of here. I'm a cat. Leave me
Yep.
alone. Leave me alone. Yeah, I'm down for that. Well, okay,
They're
now
they're
I've
above humans.
left. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, there is that running joke that you should practice your presentation the first couple of times to your cats,
Oh,
because then they're a very receptive audience, and They're probably not going anywhere. Although you don't get good notes from the cat. The cat's not going to be like, actually, I
Actually,
thought this joke didn't land, and
they
you got a
they
typo on that one.
they might be better critics than dogs, though. I feel like dogs will be like, "You're brilliant, no matter what," and cats are
You're
like,
absolutely right. Dog's like, that's the
"You're an
best
idiot.
presentation I've ever seen. Can we go for a walk? Can you give me a treat? The cat's like, I don't like you.
You're an idiot."
Yeah, you're an idiot. We all know that. I'm not like the dog. I have self-respect.
Yeah.
So Glenn says they just asked me to put up the next slide. Yeah, I can see that. Next slide.
Yeah.
Next slide,
Actually,
please. Next
they might just reach over to your keyboard and do it themselves.
They do, and then they schedule a meeting, and then they Slack someone a bunch of garbage. Yeah. So I was on the road the last couple of weeks, and my cat Han, and Glenn knows this. My cat Han has gotten very particular about his morning routine, and there's a certain amount of attention that he expects in the morning. He'll sit on my lap while I'm eating breakfast, basically. And so while I was gone, that couldn't happen. So he was hanging out with my wife, whose desk is right over my shoulder, except of course he needs attention right now. So he would lay on her keyboard. He would, lay across. I mean, he was being a pest. I got a whole bunch of pictures of him being an absolute pest last week. So, he's happier that I'm home now, but then he just left again. So he must not care that much. It's probably fine. It's fine. But now we were talking in the pre-show a bit about this kind of crazy world we live in, and I think part of what I love about this job is that I feel like we get to play with new stuff and then go teach it to people and then go share it, and I just think that's so amazing. And I know that was something we talked about in the context of how hard it is to say no, which we'll definitely get to. But what drew you into this space to do this again, to get up in front of audiences and perform? I mean, that's what it is. It's performance art for sure.
Yeah. I think the bulk of it was just getting to learn a lot of different technologies. I like tech. I like to play with new stuff. Doesn't mean it's always, useful for this specific thing or another, but just to kind of know what it is. There's a huge amount of tools and technologies and things you can do and ways you can go about building stuff that it's impossible to know it all. And so on one hand, you have to kind of set expectations that there's no way I can possibly know everything. But on the other hand, you can kind of sit and play. You can either dabble very lightly in tons of different things, or you can dig deep on a few things and then kind of surface area touch other things, or you can pick 5 or 6 things and go deep on just those, for your career.
Yeah.
And I think it's really kind of up to you. Whether you want to be master of a couple of things, or jack of all trades, master of none, or whether we want to be somewhere in between. And I think that's really exciting and really flexible. And hey, maybe I'll decide to do one side of that, for 2 or 3 years. And then maybe I'll decide to do another side of that for another couple of years. And that's totally fine. At least for most positions. You might have a few that are a little bit more strict on that, but yeah, I think you're pretty flexible on how much and how far you want to go with things and what you want to focus in on. And it kind of opens up a lot of doors for different technologies and different opportunities and learning about the industry itself, which I think is super exciting and fun. And then you get to meet a lot of really cool, smart people along the way too, which is always an added bonus. And you get to travel, which, people always think that's so glamorous. And you're like, yeah, I see a lot of airports and hotel rooms. That's glamour. All right. And I eat a lot of fast food or airport Starbucks, but there are a few things you get to venture out and do, and that's fun too.
Well, I think the travel is an interesting thing you bring up, because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people look at our job and they say, oh my God, it's great. You get to travel all over the world. And you're right. That is one of the really cool perks. But I think a lot of folks confuse what vacation travel is versus what business travel is. Because people think, oh, it's great. You leisurely stroll in and you're on vacation, you're sightseeing. Most of the time it's, I got in this morning and I showered at the lounge at the airport, and then I went to the venue and I gave a talk, and then I went back to the hotel and crashed, and kind of the running joke I've seen too is, it's like last week we were in London and we got to eat some really nice meals. There's some great restaurants in London. That's part of the fun. Is this restaurant exists here, and that's it. There's no other place.
Right.
But then the next day you're grabbing a bag of peanuts as you run to catch your flight. So it's literally one of the few jobs where one night you're eating at like a Michelin star restaurant, and then the next night it's a bag of peanuts in the airport. And nature of the beast. But it
Yep.
is definitely not the same as vacation travel. That's not to
No.
say it doesn't have some fun to it, and that you can try to add in a day or two here and there. But it is definitely, it wears on you too. I mean, my body still hasn't readjusted back to the central time zone. I'm still waking up at 4 a.m, and
Yeah.
it's killing me.
Yep.
But what are
Yeah.
you gonna do?
Time zone travel is a tough one to
Yes.
jump on and do a lot of.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
I still remember I did a little bit of East Coast travel. Oh, it was probably end of 2019 or so. And I went out and did like a stop in New York City, and then I think I did Boston, and I flew to Seattle. So I went to New York City
Yep.
and did something there. It was somewhere locally, and I went out to Boston and I did like a 2 or 3 day training. My husband met
Yep.
me out there because my sister was in school out there. We spent the weekend, kind of hanging out like Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. My husband left Sunday to go
Mhm.
back home so he could get up and work, and then I got on. I think I was going to take a flight Sunday afternoon as well to get down
Sure.
to um, somewhere in Virginia to do like a Neo4j training.
Okay.
And the flights, Dulles, I was supposed to go through Dulles, and the weather was absolutely dreadful. They were canceling all flights coming or delaying them at least for several hours. And I'm like,
Right.
I got to be in Virginia the next morning at like 8 or 9 a.m. to teach this class. I have to be
Right.
there. It's like an hour flight, but I have to be there. And so they were delaying and canceling flights so badly that I'm like, well, I'm not sure I would ever make a connection because I was supposed to go through
Sure.
Dulles and then get a connection to this small
Oof.
town.
Ouch.
And so I ended up leaving the airport, going back into Boston, renting a car, and driving the hour and a half or whatever it was to get down to my hotel so that I could
Sure.
stay the night, do the training, and then I think I think I did fly back from there after that. And then
Sure.
there was one in New York that I did. My sister met me up there and we spent like a day or so, but I had like some events and she just kind of tagged along to some, work things while I was working. And then I rushed out for an evening to Long Island with some friends, had dinner with them, but I was like totally wiped, wasn't even worth anything.
Right.
And then came
Right.
back on the train late that night, like drifting off on the train because I was so tired.
I bet.
Spoke, I think, the next day and flew out that night all the way to Seattle so I could get up the next morning and do an event for Microsoft out at their Redwood
Mhm.
campus. So
Right.
there's stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, glamour. No,
Yeah.
like I was
No.
totally
No.
wiped. I wasn't worth anything. I may
Uh-huh.
have gotten to go have dinner with friends out on Long Island. I could say I've been to Long Island, but did I really see
Right.
anything? No, I
Mm,
didn't. I didn't really
mm,
enjoy it as much as I
Yeah.
probably should
Yeah.
or could have. So yeah, and
Well,
it's
and
well, and you and I were talking too about we hate to say no, and so then you end up with
yes.
all these like dog legs here and there
Yeah.
running out to different places, and you don't have any time to sightsee because
Right.
you're jumping from this place to that place to that place
Right.
every other day.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point that because there's two components to that. One is chain things together, and sometimes that's deliberate, and sometimes that's just what happens. That's kind of what
Yeah,
happened with me in London. Things just kept getting added onto the trip, and so okay, all right, I got lots of stuff going on, But then there's also that difficulty of saying no, and you don't always know when you're going to get into something or not. And I mean, this happens to me every year. I have like the stupid travel week where individually each thing is fine, and then it's only after the fact you realize, oh wait, that's all chained together now, and that means I'm leaving on this day and I'm coming home on that day. Oh, okay, that's gonna be interesting. And
yeah,
you start doing the math and you're like, I'll be home for 6 non-contiguous days in May. Cool, that won't annoy the heck out of my family or my cats.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Or when
it's
am I going to get my laundry done? Or like I
oh
gotta have
totally
clean clothes for the next thing. Or even you get busy and sidetracked with things, or you got a lot of deadlines you got to hit, and then all of a sudden your content is behind. So you've got
right,
maybe that first trip's content done and ready to go, but maybe you still need
right,
to refresh the following one, and you're not going to be home before that
right,
following one. So then you
right.
have to do it on the road. You're tweaking and testing and talking to yourself in a hotel room to try to run through
Yes,
your presentation for the following week
yes.
because you're not going to home base to
Nope,
practice it. So
nope. Yeah, I refer to that as rebooting the suitcase. You're home just long enough to put in clean clothes and maybe get a little laundry or two done and rinse repeat.
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of those times where, you're getting into a hotel late at night, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Maybe you're trying to grab a bite to eat at room service, and then you're trying to get stuff ready for the next morning or the next day.
Yeah.
And yeah, it all just strings together. And as an occupational hazard, you will have a flight delay. You will have a flight canceled.
Yes.
You will have some kind of travel delay. It's just a matter of when.
Yep.
I say that we've traded in that micro dose of commute stress of driving into the office and driving home every day for the macro dose of, you're going to sleep in a airport at some point. You're going to miss a flight. Connection's going to go through. You're going to spend a night somewhere you didn't plan on, and away you go. So, well, Coda Sean brings up that we're all going to be at KCDC, and so we'll definitely have to hang out. And by the way, Sean, as a total aside, if you want to be on the show, just let me know. Be happy to have you as a guest. Maybe we could do a live show at KCDC. That'd be kind of interesting. I'm sure we can figure that out. Maybe by then I'll have my mics. I ordered that back in like December.
Oof.
Corporate procurement. It's a joy. It's a total joy. And then so Glenn says, typing on the airplane is not great either. Yeah, I've kind of given up ever trying to bring my laptop out on an airplane if you don't want your laptop to be crushed when the person in front of you decides to lean back.
Yeah. I've seen some horror stories of that happening, and now I'm really careful about it. I found that airplane Wi-Fi is not near good enough to usually run code. But you can usually do like email and presentations and stuff like that while you're on. So, but yeah,
email messaging. Okay. And that's about it.
Yeah. And airport is not a whole lot better, but it is a little better.
No. Yeah, it is slightly better. Okay. Cool. Coda Sean is down for that. That's awesome. And the drives in. Oh my, look at that. So your setup would be way more professional than what I would be able to pull on the road, because it's always that balance of, do I really want to bring a Pelican case like Berglund? Probably not. Probably don't want to travel with 65 pounds of recording equipment to do an hour-long podcast, but it's probably fine. It's probably fine. So we've touched on this a couple times, but why is it so hard for us to say no? Why it's such a challenge to try to find the Goldilocks of scheduling, right? So I know my schedule is very packed for basically the month of May, the month of June, and part of July, and then it quiets down a little bit. And I did it to myself. I have no one to blame but myself. But it's one of the perennial challenges. I mean, do you have any thoughts on why we don't say no, or how to handle, like, how do we underschedule ourselves just a bit?
Well, I think we touched on a little bit of this in the pre-show, but part of it is, as developer relations or developer advocates, we want to help people. And so we want to be there. We know we like certain events, or we know, we see a lot of colleagues and stuff there, and we know we learn from these people. And so, hey, these are events that I really want to be at each year.
Right.
And often that list continues to grow year over year as you do it more and more, which that, doesn't help either, but you can't always attend, your favorite 5, or, after a couple more years, your favorite 10 events or whatever it is. So that's, I think, part of it. And we just want to be there, and we want to show developers how to do this or how to do that, or we want to hear about their problems so we can, work on that and see how we would go about solving those problems, and really just interact with real developers. Right. So that's one thing. Another thing that I think is difficult is there's probably a little bit of fear of missing out too. I know I mentioned there's some events that we really like. And so we want to submit to all these things, and, it sounds great in theory, but then when the calendar looms, it's like, maybe not so much. And that's another thing too. Most of these events, you're submitting 6-8 months in advance for this. And you look at your calendar in 6-8 months, it's like, oh yeah, I got nothing on it. Let's go ahead and schedule. Or it's like, oh, okay, I've got one event there, but I can do this other one here and there. And then all of a sudden, as you get closer, more stuff gets scheduled. Somebody tosses in a meetup, or somebody tosses in, don't take this the wrong way, but podcast interview, or this and that. And so all these little gaps just kind of get filled in. Or hey, I need to produce this article. I haven't written an article on my blog in a month. I need to get this done. And these little things kind of fall in the gaps, basically. And as you get up closer to that date, it all kind of looks at you, and it's like, oh my gosh, I way overscheduled and I had no idea.
Right.
But again, when
Right.
you're looking at something 6, 8 months in advance, it's like, yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. Or same thing, oh, I got 8 months to prepare that presentation. And then all of a sudden you're a month out and it's like, oh, I really got to start working on this now.
That's happened to me last summer. That bit me. I had created some new, like a new series for O'Reilly, and I knew the first one was scheduled. I think it started in September. It was like in 3 weeks kind of thing. Software engineering
Yeah.
fundamentals in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so what my little brain forgot is that July, whatever, I'm like, oh, wait, next week's August. I need to start cranking out material because in 4 weeks I have to deliver this,
Yeah.
and it isn't like it's one thing to pull together a 1 hour talk or even a 90-minute talk. And then you think, oh, wait, I need like 9 hours of content here. And I knew I had blocks of it already. And so it's kind of a matter of going, grabbing this and grabbing that and reformatting. But that's like,
Assembling
yeah,
it.
there's some other blocks here that while I have it in my brain, I have to get it down on the slide. That doesn't just happen, as much as
Yeah.
we may wish.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, maybe to some degree, I know we both talked, we don't like to sit and twiddle our thumbs, but sadly, to some degree, you're not sitting there going, oh, what am I going to do over the next 2 months and sit for 3 hours strategizing? You don't really have that kind of time unless you block it in your calendar and say,
Right.
this is the time
Right.
that I'm going to spend thinking and strategizing on what I want to do next, or how I want to present this. And so that's one thing that I think is really tricky too. It's a little bit of, strategy and then a little bit of actually doing. And I think a lot of times we get so busy doing because there's so many things on our
Yeah.
plates that we don't take enough time to really, think ahead or to strategize well. And then it's
Right.
a little bit more last minute than what we'd like.
Right. And plus, to your point, I mean, this is exactly what happened to me last week. People figure out you're in a spot and then they're like, hey, as long as you're here, can you meet with this client or can you
Yeah.
join me at this thing? And then it's like, yeah, I guess I can just do that. And in context, it's like, yeah, it's fine. It's a couple hours on Monday, but then, oh, wait, now that means my Monday has to change into something else. And
Yep. And I got to spend, okay, now instead of running my session anytime Monday between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I now have only this block of time. Or, oh, somebody wants to go and grab coffee with me during this block. Okay, now that means I got to prepare the night before or the morning of, to run my session one last time, or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a schedule juggle all the time.
Right. Well, and
it's worse when you're actually on the road.
Yes. Well, because again, you don't think about all the extra time that goes into getting from point A to point B. We were also discussing this in that pre-show that, okay, well, in order to get to that client, that means I've got to get on this train and go to this station and take a cab. And that's 2 hours and 20-ish minutes, which back in I got to leave. I got to get up at 5 in the morning, to do this thing at 10. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I guess I'm not doing anything else that day. So,
guess I better go to bed early the night before.
Right. And that's hard to do sometimes because, you maybe you'd have made plans to go out to eat with somebody or, things stack and next thing you know, it's already 8:00 and you're like, okay, well, now what do I do? Or you just can't fall asleep. That happens to me usually on day 2 of an international trip. You just lay there and stare at the ceiling because your brain's like, what? It's 4:00 in the afternoon. Why are you in bed? Yeah. So I like Glenn's comment here. Hard to say no for the aha moment. Yeah. And if you organize a conference, well, exactly, Glenn. I mean, when you're on the other side of the coin, it's definitely part of it. And a lot of effort goes into that. But I mean, that's definitely what I missed, Jennifer. I don't know how you felt about presenting to screens over the last couple of years. I really did miss the live studio audience experience.
Yeah. It's hard because the 2020 was when my son was born. And so I wanted to be home. And so I wanted to be here. I didn't want to be on the road. I didn't want to travel. And that worked out beautifully, pandemic for all its horrible things, that
pandemic aside.
In my personal situation, it actually was a phenomenal way to be able to be home. And to give me more flexibility. I could take on virtual, conferences, and there were a ton of virtual events going on at that point. So you got your pick of the lot basically, and events where I would have never been able to say yes because it coincided with another event. I could now do, Java 1 seems to always conflict with something.
Right.
And so then I would miss that other event. Well, one year it conflicted with Spring 1.
Yeah.
I think. No. It was a company event of mine that
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to miss, and that conflicted with
Sure.
Spring 1. Had that all been virtual, I would have been able to do both and
Right.
nothing flat. It would have been easy. So I think that's the really nice thing about virtual events is you don't have to say no as often because your travel schedule all of a sudden is non-existent.
Right.
Um, and your preparation time, your lead time is a lot better. The
Right.
downside to that is, yes, those aha moments. And I did really
Yeah.
miss that. I've spoken at a couple of conferences this spring in person, and kind of that connection with people, your audience. You can kind of see when people are engaged and how many people are leaving the room, and that helps you tailor your content, how fast you need to move through something, how, okay, it's time to
Mhm.
move on, or okay, let's skip to the snazzy part, or this or that. And so that really, really helps, where in a virtual environment, most of the time you don't get that until the end. And the only feedback you really get is if people ask questions. And there have been
Right.
several events that I've been on that nobody's asked any questions, and it's just dead. It's
Yeah.
like, well, was it a good
Yeah.
presentation? Did people know all this stuff already? Did,
Right.
are they confused? Could I have backed up and done something a little bit better? And you have no clue.
Right.
So that is something that we haven't been able to capture in virtual events yet that we get now in in-person ones.
Yeah.
So
No.
it's kind of this two-sided coin. There's pros and
Yeah.
cons to all of that, but
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's something I've reflected on really since DevNexus, being back on the road in April, and just realizing a lot of time goes into that 1 hour presentation, and that isn't, it's something I never really thought about before until that goes away, and then you've got that time back to do other things with. And
yeah.
I do think one of the interesting things that seems to have happened during the pandemic is a lot of folks have sort of like taken stock a bit in what's important to them and how do they want to spend their time. And a
Yeah.
lot of folks have said, I'm done commuting, I'm working from home,
Yeah.
if at all possible. And people have made some different choices, I think, based on that. I did that in a really small way in the fall. There was an event that I love. I've been to a bunch of times. It's in a great city. It's a fantastic event, great audience. And I didn't pitch because I'm like, I really want to be home that week,
Yeah.
because it's like, how busy you get. And it's like, I really want to have a week where I know I'm home. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So Code with Sean echoes the aha moment. And they mention, oh yeah, Sean, agree 100%. That's part of what I love about this job. And there are few moments quite as gratifying as someone coming up to you and saying, I was at your talk last year and you mentioned this and it changed the way I do my job, or it really helped me, or you were right about this book, or you were right about this point. And I did one workshop on some JavaScript tools, and one of my attendees said, just learning about that tool has made this conference worthwhile for me. Like you've now justified my expenses. And it's like, cool,
That's
thank you.
awesome.
It
Yeah.
is. It's fantastic, to hear that kind of stuff from audiences. And so please, audiences, do give us that feedback. We do feed off of that. So, please tell us when you enjoy what we're throwing at you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the one of the big things that made me realize I did miss in-person events is I did DevNexus earlier this year, and
Yeah.
spoke there, and I got done with my session, and a couple of people came up afterward and was like, this was a really great introduction. It gave me a lot of background, gave me some ideas for how I can work with this. Or they asked me questions about, well, why did you choose this versus this? And I was able to give them like a knowledgeable answer on, well, here's the choice that I made for this demo because of this and that. And so
Sure.
I love that feedback because I know the work that went into it. They want to know my opinions. They want to know, what do you know, or how can you help us? And that presentation obviously helps somebody. And that's our whole
Yeah.
goal, right? That's the reason we stand up there on stage and try to do something, is maybe not to make, somebody's life better. That's high aspirations, right? But at least to give somebody some new ideas or a new perspective, way to
Right.
think about something, or something else to try, or to look into. And I think that even that feedback is like, okay, this made my time here
Right.
worth it, because then I
Right.
know I could help somebody else out.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's part of what I've reflected on over the last few weeks, is that this is helping someone, and I've always felt like if one person walks out of a talk with a nugget, with something that improves their work experience, something they didn't know about, an aha moment, then I've done my job. I've earned
Yeah.
my keep, so to speak. And I do think Sean has an example where you don't need to know everything, and someone said, hey, thank you for taking that pressure away from me. And so I think sometimes it's even just that simple fact of, yeah, I've been there. I've done that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of people at various points come up to me after talk and say, hey, where do you work? And then I'd say, and they're like, oh man, I could have sworn you worked at my company, because we had that same exact conversation last week. And like, yeah, this stuff's a lot more universal than maybe we wish or would like it to be. And I
Yeah.
think that can be really like refreshing, beneficial, relieving, when people realize, oh, we're not unique in that regard. This
Yeah.
isn't a problem that just we have. Like, this is more common. And oh, that actually makes me feel better that it's not just, to put the parenting metaphor, it's not just my kid.
Yeah.
It's most teenage boys. Like, okay, all right, well, that makes me feel a little better. I didn't fail as a
Right.
parent, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think too, it's easy to kind of get in your own little bubble and think
Oh
that,
yeah,
oh my gosh, that these problems are huge. I don't know how to, get over this, or maybe it's something wrong with me, or this or that. And
right.
I think across the IT industry, we've labeled it as imposter syndrome. And
Yes.
all of us kind of feel that to some degree, but I think even outside IT, people feel this. Um,
Yeah.
Even as a parent, you feel that a little bit, but, but yeah, I think reminding at a base level that we all deal with this. We all
Yes.
struggle with things. We all are constantly learning, and will be, for the rest of our careers, hopefully the
Mhm.
rest of our lives potentially too, but at
Right.
least in the IT
Right.
industry, the rest of our career. And so all of us are on that same playing field, and we can all help kind of
Yeah.
improve and help one another along the way, by sharing our experiences, or by at least confirming that, hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We can accomplish
Hey
this. We
man, me
can,
too.
yeah.
Well, Glenn says the cats are still going to judge us, and
Yes.
uh, absolutely right. The cats are going to judge us. No getting around that. And yes, Sean, the dang cats, right? That's what they
Yep.
do. But
Yep.
I'm really glad you brought up imposter syndrome, because I teach a graduate class, or like two graduate classes, and I've noticed over the last couple of cohorts an awful lot of imposter syndrome concern. And I've had multiple students that I've had to, and these are full-time working adults. These aren't kids in university. These are people in the real world. And, it's been really interesting to me to have to kind of like counsel them on, yeah, no, man, we all feel that. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Just take a breath and it'll be okay. And I wonder, I guess I don't have a perspective, because I've only ever been in this line of work. I don't know. Do like electricians feel imposter syndrome? Do mechanics? Do teachers? I mean, I assume it's not just us that feel
Well,
that way. But
I know as a musician, I definitely did, but music is
sure,
extremely, extremely competitive and cutthroat,
right?
more so even than tech is, by a long
Yeah,
shot. And so you constantly battled that. Well, I'm not good enough to be here. Or I'm not.
right.
I need to practice harder. Or I need to do this or that. And you get that with IT. And I think even
Sure.
as a student, you feel that in school. Well, I'm not working hard enough, or I didn't make what I thought I would make in on the test, or or
Mhm.
I didn't put as much effort as I should have into that paper. Somebody else is going to make a better grade, or, so I think all of us at various times are going to feel that. I
Yeah,
don't think it's entirely unique to the IT industry, but I think
sure.
the IT industry has put a label on it,
Yeah,
and really
that's
talked
what we
about it
do,
quite a
right?
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. That it does seem to get to. Okay, good. So Sean says it's everywhere. Any
Okay,
feel
cool.
there's a competition for a job? Yeah, yeah, I'm sure
True.
that's part of it, right? It's the competitive aspect, and just the could I have done more? And I do think part of it for us is the fact that there's no best way.
Yeah.
There's least worst.
Yeah.
Like in certain fields, I guess you could make the argument that no, this is optimal, and anything below that, okay, you can see the room for improvement. Whereas for us, it's like, well, there's no possible best solution. It's just, this is the one that worked for me. And as we said before, you and I could be working on the exact same problem and come up with very different solutions that both work
Yeah.
and are both within the parameters, but we just see the problems in a different way.
Yeah.
And so Whitney says she struggled with that. Yeah, Whitney, we all do.
Yeah.
There's still getting around it, right? It's
Yeah.
comes with a paycheck.
The good and the bad to the paycheck. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I wish there's I bet our cats don't have imposter syndrome, do they?
Probably not. But I think that's something too, that if you remind yourself you have something to give, you have a perspective to offer, you have experiences that nobody else has, you
Right.
have a thought process or a logic to your mind that nobody else does. And so whether your perspective is seen as, silly or not, it's a valid
Right.
perspective because it's
Right.
another human's perspective added to the mix. So I think that's one thing that helps me, before I get up and present, or I'm in the room with a lot of, important or smart people, is that, okay, I may not know near as much as these other people, but I can lend a perspective. Or when they
Right.
ask me something, say, oh, well, is it like this and this? Here's what I know. Is it similar to this, or how does that work? In so doing, you're making them feel smart because you're asking and you're interested and you care about their opinions and their experiences. But on the flip side, you're getting to learn and improve and continue gaining knowledge as well. And at no stretch will you look silly or stupid by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Well, and I think you're hinting at something that I know that Whitney and I've talked about, that the new person has a perspective that's invaluable because they're not bringing along any baggage. They're not bringing along, that's how we've always done it. They're not clouded by, oh, well, I know I can't say this in this meeting because that'll offend so-and-so, and so they're willing to point out, like, well, why did you do this routine when the language just has that feature? Why don't you just use that instead? And they're like, oh, we didn't know that was there, or, well, nobody ever asked that before. And so I think that gets lost a lot. Everybody thinks, well, you got to have 10 years of experience to be valuable. No, I think in many cases that the person that's new to the team right out of university is incredibly valuable because they're not encumbered by all the scar tissue of the past. They're willing to question things that we may not even think about. Like, well, yeah, I guess I never thought about that. I thought it had to be that way.
Well, and as somebody who knows Neo4j or Cypher really well, I'm used to saying the same old anytime, people ask questions or want to hear intro to Neo4j content or whatever. And so I kind of give it the same way, or kind of get in my mental model. This is how I would do this and that. And somebody, would ask, well, why? Or somebody would look at that and go, well, you didn't explain this, or you missed this step. When I followed your steps, I didn't get there. And it's like, oh, well, that's because I made assumptions because I already know how to do it. And I've done it so many times I could do it in my sleep. But somebody new looking at my content with fresh eyes is like, you're not helping beginners very well in this. Because you're missing something, or because you didn't think about somebody else's perspective on this. And so I find that extremely valuable as someone who likes to do a lot of, if you're new to this topic, here's content and here's code and all that kind of stuff. I try to write for the beginner's perspective because I know what it feels like. But it's really easy once you know something well to miss things from the beginner's perspective. 100%. And that's where an external person or somebody new or somebody who doesn't have that knowledge is super valuable, because you would never see it yourself unless you're being really, really critical or you're handing it out to other people who are new. So.
Right. Well, to your point, there's those things but everybody knows that, right? And or you've just forgotten because it's just part of your routine, or it's just in the back of your head, or I aliased that 7 years ago in my bash script and I've never thought about it since. Isn't that the right, you're like, oh wait, no, this is a new machine. That's right. That doesn't exist. Oh, what did I do to do that? And all those little things that you totally forget about. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example, like onboarding. My team, it was basically the same until a couple people left. We've hired a few people. And so we never thought about like onboarding until Lee asked, where's your onboarding guide? And we're like, oh, that's an excellent question. We don't have one of those. We really should. And so it's all of those sort of things that you don't think about, like, hey, when you're trying to book a flight, here's a tip. When you're, look for hotels this way, or you don't forget, you can go in and check this box. And this little stuff that you just kind of take for granted until you're like, well, but somebody had to teach me that, didn't they? I wasn't
Yeah.
born with that knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. So Glenn brings up the 101 talks. And I know this is comes from experience since Glenn, I still think, Glenn, you've got the record for the highest attendance of any talk at Spring One when you did the What is Spring talk. And you might think to yourself, like, why would we need a What is Spring talk? And then it ended up getting
At
a
Spring
massive,
One.
massive audience, right? But
Yeah.
but I mean, that's another example of that. Yeah, you don't need to blush, Glenn. You should just embrace the fact that it was an amazing talk. We assume people have some of this knowledge, and I was disabused of this a few summers ago. I was talking to someone and I mentioned Gang of Four patterns, and the person just stared at me, and I said, well, the Gang of Four book. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I had to Google the name of the book because it's just Gang of Four, it's just Goff.
Yeah.
And so I had to like Google it, and I said, you've never read this? And he said, no. And I said, oh, okay. You should familiarize yourself with this. And I just assumed that people would know that. I just assume people have read Pragmatic Programmer. And it's, I had to discover that stuff too. And so,
Yeah.
assumptions are not great, Dan.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the movie whiz who's like, oh, you've seen that, right? No, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, or I haven't had time for movies since I got out of high school, or
Right.
this or that. And it's just something, when you're immersed in it, you don't see other outside perspectives very well. And so
Right.
it's hard to do that. But I really like the 101 stuff. Not that, you need that deeper content, of course, because otherwise you would only ever go surface level. But having some range of 101 talks is good for those who are new to tech in general, or those who are new to their company or the industry itself, or maybe they work on legacy applications and code, and so they haven't done a whole lot of work with the new stuff, or
Right.
they haven't gotten they work a lot of hours, and so they don't sit down and read extra books or do side projects outside of their work hours, or who knows what their situation is. And so having that kind of background, or even when you do like brush over a topic, say, hey, I realize that I'm just kind of brushing on this. If you want to know more, here are the sources, or, this is kind of how this fits into what we're talking about, and then move on. So you have to be, kind of thoughtful about that. But yeah, it's fun to do the 101 talks, but it's tough too, because it's
Absolutely.
easy to miss stuff.
Right. It's easy to skip a step because
Yeah.
you don't think about it, or again, it's something you've already got installed, or something you've got aliased, and it just sort of happens, or just you just naturally do it because yeah, of course you do this step, and it's easy
Right.
to gloss over. I think the other piece that's missing a lot is the fundamentals kinds of talks, and I say that selfishly as someone who's built some of that material, but we get so fixated on what's the latest API, what's the latest language feature, what's the latest language, that we forget that there's basic, blocking and tackling, layups, free throws, whatever analogy you want to make. We need to get good at that too, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks sort of think, oh no, I don't need any of that. I'm way advanced.
Right.
I don't think you are, and I don't think many of us are, frankly. And so
Yeah.
we don't always do a good job of understanding, before I take that Kubernetes, the hard parts, maybe I need to make sure I understand like YAML.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the music theory and music topic that
Right.
we talked about. People, sure, it's fun to play music. It's fun to grab the latest piece and run through it, or whatever it is. But if you don't understand the theory and how something is actually functioning, one, it makes it harder to use that new thing, that new tech.
Yeah.
And two, you're not actually getting the full benefit out of it, because you don't understand how it fits into everything else. And so I think that's where those fundamentals and the concepts kind of come into play, is if you understand the structure of things, and this is going to date me squarely in between probably new and older groups, but I didn't grow up when computers were being built, at the early
Right.
outset. I grew up when a lot of it was, UIs, and you had point and click.
Yeah.
So do I really understand the low levels of Java? Do I know C? I don't. And so
Sure.
those are concepts that I know I'm missing. and then I want to learn, and I pick up bits as I go along for how like early networking worked, or how stuff moves through the hardware.
Yeah.
And that's all stuff that, some people who tinkered with that stuff back when it was brand new know all that stuff. And it's like, oh, it's no big deal. I built computers, since I was a kid.
Right.
And that wasn't one of my interests as a child. And I grew up with things kind of already put together for you in a lot of ways. And so we didn't get that kind of hands-on experience. And so
Right.
there's pros and cons with no matter where you are in your experiences, just kind of figuring out where those gaps are, and trying to plug the holes up as you go.
Right. No, that's a great point. I think, also to the music analogy, I don't think most people appreciate how much time musicians spend practicing,
Yeah.
or any, professional athlete, anything in that same regard. I remember seeing this interview, or hearing this interview with one of the best, I want to say, mandolin players in the world. Like, so this person is
Okay.
an absolute rock star, virtuoso, whatever word you want to use. And so the interviewer said, well, like, how many hours a day do you spend practicing? He says, oh, on a good day, 2 to 4, on a good day. And it's like, wow, I mean, this is already someone who plays at a level beyond, 99.99% of the population. And they're
Mhm.
still putting in,
Yeah.
30, 40, 50 hours a week of practice.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Cypheric. I always love trying to pronounce people's screen names. Those early 80s computers, electronics, coding in the home, did not even think we would have achieved in the last 40 years. Yeah, constantly learn and contribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could ask Ada Lovelace what her could you imagine
No, not at
taking someone
all.
like, well, I think about this with Turing. So I got to go to Bletchley Park when I was in London, and when you realize he was 41 when he committed suicide, and you just think,
Really.
where would computing be today if he was still alive, or if he had
Mhm.
lived, to be 85? I mean, it
Yeah.
just the end imitation game always gets me a little teary, because I just think about what he accomplished in his lifetime and what he could have accomplished if he had lived a full life. And
Yeah. Well, even Grace Hopper, um,
yeah,
you know, just to pick her brain, or to be like, well, what was
right,
it like? Uh, she was co-founder in so many different ways, and kind of an
right.
unusual being in the
Mhm,
industry, and um, military and everything. And it's like, man, to pick her brain and to just
mhm.
get a piece. We think, to some degree, we're always struggling with, a a world problem, or a, difficult situation. But you think about maybe where some of these people came, and yet they did amazing things with their situations. And it's like, we have to realize the other perspective too, that there may be a lot of problems and a lot of terrible things going on, but we can still do some really awesome things in spite of that.
Right.
But going back to the Grace Hopper thing, just, if she'd, I don't know, made another decade, or, the next 50 years, where would technology be at that point? Where would
Right.
programming or languages be at that point?
Right.
It's just, I don't know, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we have a Fuel Snable appearance. A friend who was a musician, and the grind killed the joy, so he switched to computers. I don't know how to feel about, like, okay, I'm going into computers because this killed the joy for me. This no longer sparks joy. But again, I see that quite a bit. And then
Yeah.
also talks about needing to explain how ASCII works, take it for granted. Yeah, I mean, again, there's plenty of these things that if you didn't have that class in college, or you didn't deal with that, you didn't have to know it, worry about it,
Yeah.
etc. Nature of the beast. Yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
just don't assume things, is the moral of the story. So,
Right.
and ask Church what he thinks about the current mess. Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that you think about, like, the Apollo program, and they put, human beings on the moon, and like, we're all walking around with computers in our pockets that are
Yeah.
orders of magnitude more powerful than anything they had. And
Yep.
we complain about what, oh man, this app takes up a lot of resources. I don't know, my fan
Yeah.
spun up on my computer. day.
Yeah. Or I had to wait 10 seconds for the site to load.
Right, right. How dare you not instantaneously? How do you should know what I want before I want it,
Yeah.
and oh yeah, but okay, good point, Phil Snable. The Apollo computer could not in fact run TikTok. So
Yeah.
that might actually be a feature, not a bug though, in fairness.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
True. Too
I don't know.
true.
I don't know. Well,
Yeah.
let's
I
see here.
read.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I read a couple of books. And I can't. It was made into a movie, and I'm trying to remember now what the Hidden Figures. I read that, and I think I
Yes.
read. There was one other book that I read about World War II female coders. I can't remember the title of it now. I'll have to go back and look. But it was really interesting to see what they did and the technology they were dealing with at the time. Back in the 1930s and 40s, it was so much different. All of these calculations were done manually to send,
Right.
the missions to space, to, create fighter jets for World War II, to think
Mhm.
that we even had a shot against other world powers, and all these calculations were done by hand, and quite a few
Right.
of them by women. And
Yeah.
it was
Many
really
of them.
intriguing. Yeah, to see the technology and the day-to-day lives they had. And I just thought it was really cool stories. So I
Yeah.
enjoy kind of that peek into history, to kind of realize, we're not alone. We're just living in a different time.
Right. Well, if you ever have a day and you're near London, you should go up to Bletchley Park. It's a very cool thing for computer science like folks to just hang
I've
out, and
I've heard
it's
about that. Yes. I think I
awesome.
wanted to go last time, but again, so swamped with like tech stuff at conferences while I was there that I didn't get to go. But
Would recommend.
okay.
Definitely worth a day trip for sure. So,
Okay.
oh wait, we got a comment. Let me go check my comments here. So yeah, so no TikTok yet. No, absolutely. So Fuel says, a minute aging relative worked on the first Swedish computer, asked them what they used it for. Yeah, computing artillery charts.
Oh,
That
cool.
was like the most common use of computing back in the day was artillery charts for sure. All the wonderful computation behind that.
Yeah.
But so speaking of events, we've got stuff coming up. I know we're going to be live and in person at Spring One here coming up in Toronto, June 7th and 8th. And
Cool.
you will be at Graph Connect in one of my favorite freaking cities on earth. I'm going to gain 3 pounds because I'm going to say Austin a couple times. So what's going on at Graph Connect? What are you excited about?
Well, one, this is the first in-person Graph Connect we've had in a few years now. So,
Awesome.
pandemic and some other things, went on, and we've had some other events in the mix, but we haven't been able to do a live in-person Graph Connect. So, um, I'm super excited for that. There will be a lot of Neo4j folks there, so a lot of experts. I'm going to learn some things from some of the Neo4j experts, and then I hope to kind of share and help other people who might be newer on the end of things too. So that'll be really exciting and a lot of fun. Kind of catch up with people I haven't seen in a long time, and share some knowledge, and help other developers and see where they are and what struggles they're dealing with at work or their personal projects. The other thing that's going to be really cool is we've got kind of a mix of, well, actually, the one other big thing is I think it's longer this year than it has been in the past.
Oh,
So if I
okay.
remember right, it had been only a 2-day event, 1-day training,
Okay.
1-day conference. And this year it is 1-day training, 2 days conference. So you get 3 total
Awesome.
days, which means more slots for more good technical content, which is amazing. I'm super excited about that. And then I think there's a couple of things maybe beforehand too. I want to say there's maybe a hackathon or meetup, but don't quote me on that yet. I'll have to double check that. And we usually do, a lot of cool events and stuff around. We try to get together with community and catch up with people. And there's usually community slots, we try to give out for the conference, and try to invite people who are just kind of play around with Neo4j or new to Neo4j, who want to kind of come to Graph Connect and learn more. We do that. So we've got a really cool dev zone. I believe we've got an escape room and stuff like that
Ooh,
going on too at the conference. So it'll be like a lot of fun, a lot of high excitement, probably
awesome.
after not getting to see everybody for a few years. Lots of good stuff coming, and probably better swag than we've had before and all that. So
Plus, you're in Austin, where the
right.
food is amazing, and
Well, I've never been to Austin. This will be my first
oh,
time, so
oh my
I'm
god.
looking forward to it.
Well, I can give you some recommendations offline. There's so much good food in that city. I'm a huge fan of Austin. If it weren't for the fact that it's like 93 degrees from April 1st to November 1st, I would think long
Yeah,
and hard about perhaps
I know.
relocating there.
Yeah, the first week of June is like, ooh, that's gonna be kind of toasty down south.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty much warm all summer long. There's not really,
yeah,
unless you're going there in December, January, February, it's going to be on the warm side.
yeah.
But it's an amazing
I,
city, one of my all time favorites.
yeah. Well, that's good. I'll have to get some food recommendations because I am a foodie for sure.
Oh yeah, I'll hook you up. I
Okay.
got thoughts on that matter for sure. Well, my friend, it's been so good hanging out with you. I really appreciate it. This has been a busy day for us here. I know.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it in the notes. So Deshaun made this comment early on. Lots of good stuff in the channel day, and I think Deshaun must be floating around out there. I see him hiding in my studio here for some reason. I don't know if he wants to pop in and say hi. And Whitney definitely agrees that we got lots of cool stuff going on. I don't know why we all decided to do something on Monday. Is that
Yeah.
the deal? Like I had Monday all to myself for 60 episodes, and then people decided like to barge in on Monday. Like, I mean, it's Monday. I don't know. It's probably fine. Probably fine. All right. Well, Deshaun's not paying attention, so I guess we'll just assume that.
Maybe
I
stepped
do know
away
that
for lunch.
Deshaun. There you go. He's probably eating, because I know he and Dan are going to do a yeah, I know Fuel Snable. We need to spread them out better. I'm not sure again why we all decided to be, here all at the same time. And I'm starving 6 days a week. I've been really hungry the last few days for some reason. And then we all stream. We're sorry about that, Fuel Snable. We owe you more than that. We apologize. I take
But
I take
but
no
per
blame for
Nate's
this one.
but per Nate's comment, he was here first.
Right. I mean, this is my normal time. Thank you very much. So I now last week I did actually have to bump Dan and Deshaun around a little bit because I had to keep rescheduling because I got pulled into a client thing, and so I had to move my thing earlier. And I was in a different time zone, which always makes things
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But I know that Dan and Deshaun will be doing spring. Let me double check the branding so I get this right. I gotta find brand. What are you guys calling that again? Where is it? Spring office hours. There we go. I knew it was spring. I just couldn't remember what we tagged at the end of it. So spring office hours with Dan and Deshaun. That's definitely good stuff. Way more technically interesting than anything I get into because I'm just an architect. I just draw boxes and lines. Everything else is a small matter of implementation detail. But anyway, well, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. Have a good time in Austin, and I'm sure our paths will cross again for sure at KCDC, and I would
Yes.
suspect somewhere else between now and then. If
Hopefully.
not, I'll definitely see you in Kansas City, and we can get some barbecue. I
Yep.
hear it's
That
good there.
sounds like a plan. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much. A pleasure as always. And then we'll see what kind of fun that gets us into. So let
Yeah.
me play our outgo, and then we'll call it a day. Cheers.
All right. Thanks.